Chloe Mayer of Save the Victor Roll. How's everybody doing today? Amazing, I hope. It's your older than average YouTuber here for another Let's Build palette, and today it is the Klarity Kosmetics The Bridal Party palette. So if you want to see what shades I picked to build my version of this palette, you're in the right place, and you know what you need to do? You need to keep on watching. Hey, are we ready to build the bridal party palette from Klarity? So glasses on so I can see something. Gonna try and move to one side and hopefully stay in one side. I seem to wobble back and forth a little bit, and let's get building. Alrighty, so we are doing the Klarity bridal palette. I'm gonna show the color story first here without any numbers on it, and then as we start this, I will pop up the photo with the one with the numbers so you can kind of see what colors that we're working on as we're going through, and let's get started. So the first shade I'm going to take, it is going to be actually the first couple. This palette has come in handy a lot in these build palettes. So this is quite the versatile palette. So if you have the Be Perfect the actual Be Perfect Carnival one of the Carnival palettes, that will definitely, and I think this was, I want to say 2 or 3, you would get a lot of these tones. So the first shade that we are going to use is a Tahitian Pearl, and that is right here. It's this shade here. Now I'm gonna have to do a little back and forth here. I do need to get a new iPad or something, but there we go. So for the first shade, Tahitian Pearl is kind of it's an interesting shade. It's a shimmer that feels like it has a little bit of brown versus gold in there. So when you look at this one, it looks, I think, pretty close to the shade that's in the palette there. So this was the one that I felt that was the closest. So let's go here, grab a swatch, and then pop that onto our arm here. And because it's a shimmer, it's a little bit harder to, or light shimmer, it's a little bit harder to see, but that is the first shade that I picked here, and that is Tahitian Pearl from the Mardi Gras palette. Now the second shade is also from this palette and is the shade called Attire, and it is, you know what I should do in my notes, pop a photo of the a picture at the bottom so I don't have to swap back and forth. So that's for next time. So it's this shade here. This was interesting. So while I was looking at the photo of the palette, and then I was looking at the swatches, and I took the swatches from a darker skin tone because it really, I think, showcased the colors really well. So sometimes the way the color looked in the palette and how it's swatched seemed a little bit different. So sometimes I think, oh wow, this looks exactly how it looks on the palette, and then I swatch it and I'm like, wow, it doesn't look like anything that is shown in the swatches. So it took a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, especially when you're looking at similar shades, to find one. So looking here, the shade Attire looks lighter than the one on the palette, but then when I go swatch it, I think it's pretty, let's try not to get on the shimmer. I thought it swatched a lot closer. It has a more, it was a hard shade. Like it looked like a cocoa shade, maybe. It looked, and so this was kind of the closest one I felt that I had in mine. And they all have interesting undertones, so it was hard to find an exact shade, but for me, I think this was the closest. I think this was one of the more difficult shades. There were, I think, 3 shades in here that I had the most difficulty finding a shade for, and I think this was one as well. And I think it was more me trying to find the right undertone. So now for the third shade, and the third shade is a shimmer shade, and it's a green one, and I have lots of green shimmers, but to find this right tone, this was, I would think, the closest, but not 100%. So I took the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. I'm not sure if this one's available anymore, but they had that other kind of bigger green one, which I think had some of the shades in there, so you might be able to find it there. And then I took the shade Moss, which is this green here, which looks lighter here than it does in the photo for the palette. But I think when I swatched it, it felt pretty, it was the closest one that I had in that undertone, because this is the one that here is a very dark emerald, and I think most of the greens that I leaned for are either really mossy in my shimmers or way brighter. So this was like kind of the closest darker green shimmer that I had. And when you look at the photo, you have to look close, because on just the photo of the palette itself, it actually looked like a matte. But then when I looked at the swatches, it was definitely a darker green, more emerald than this. But this was, I think, the closest one in my collection that looked to it. So that's number 3. And again, that was Moss from the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. And I think that might be all. Oh no, I think the Wilderness palette may show up again. So I'm just going to pop this over here. So for shade number 4, I went to another one that's been a little bit of a favorite in the swatches, but I think except for the W7 in this one, I think everybody else might be new to this this build. So this is again the Surge palette from Blend Bunny, and the closest shade that I could find in my collection to number 4 was the shade Grunge. And again, I felt like it was undertones that I struggled with finding matching. So this one is, I thought it would be super, super easy, but I am finding that a lot of things look similar to your collection until you actually go through them. But I do get them, I think, close enough. And then that is a shade here called Grunge. Let me just take one more swipe on there, and that's there. And then again, looking at the photo, Grunge looked like it was a dark, like almost a brown purple. So for me, this feels like it has a teeny bit of a purple undertone, but not too much. So I think that was as closest to the shade called Bridesmaid in the palette, but it is Grunge from Blend Bunny, the Surge palette. So that was number 4. So for number 5, here's a new one for our build, I believe. I don't think we've used this one before. This is from Violet Voss, and it is called a Violet Sunset. And we are using the self-titled shade of Violet Sunset. This one was really, really hard for me to find because the picture looks very purple in the palette, but then when I looked at the swatches, it was like I want to say more of a raspberry, purpley raspberry. It was kind of tough. So for me, this was the closest that I had swatched. So we're going to go in here again, Violet Voss, Violet Sunset. And then this was for shade number 5. I think this ended up being the last shade that I found because I did not find anything that's really like this in my collection. My purples are purple, and then my pinks are pinks, and my raspberries are raspberries. So it's not quite the same, but again, it's the closest that I could find. So I will call it reminiscent thereof, but there we go. So that is number 5. So it's Violet Sunset for Violet Voss from the Violet Sunset palette. So there we go. So that is a number 5. So now for number 6, this is another one that when you look at the palette here, it doesn't look like the picture in the photo, but when I swatched it and kind of the name of the shade, it was pretty close. So this is the Everything palette from Jean-Luc Cosmetics, and this one is a very nice neutral palette with some nice pops of colors and a very, very dark black. These go on really, really well, and then we are using the shade Orange Soda, so that is this shade here. So here it looks like kind of like a light beigey tone, and then when you look at the palette here as well, it looks almost like darker, like a couple, looks almost more like this shade when you look at the palette photo, but then when you go to swatch it, it had a very matte, dusty orange shade. So when we take the shade Soda Pop here and we swatch it, this was the closest that I found that kind of matched the swatch on there. So it does have a kind of a peachy, orangey, I'm just going to grab a little bit more using my pinky is a little bit smaller, was kind of the closest that I could find looking at the swatches. So this is the first 6 shades, and we've got 6 more to go. So now for number 7, let's see here, number 7, this is from Juvias Place, and I've used Juvias Place a few times, but I don't think I've used this palette, and this is the Saharan2 palette, and we are using the shade, and I don't have the original carton, so if it had shades on the original carton, it is gone. Oh no, they have shades here. Look at that. I guess because it's the white on yellow, I couldn't read it. So I had originally said top right, but I think it is called Hadaya. So Hadaya. So this was, so here it looks neutrally browny shade here, but then when I go to swatch it, and I thought this one at first was the right shade, but when I swatch this one, I think this is the, oops, okay, I'm gonna have to do it on this side now. This was the closest to the swatches that I had in the palette. I have quite a few orangey shimmers, but this one felt that I had that was the closest. Like I said, this palette is another one where I'm finding I don't have exact, I just have shades that are reminiscent of when swatched. So this is the Juvias Place Saharan2, and again, it is the shade Hadaya. So that's that shade there. I had thought originally this shade looked pretty close too, but I think when I swatched it, oh, I'm just gonna stick it under number 7 here for a sec here. Something about it, what I think, because this one is a little bit darker, I think this because this was a little bit more peachier orange, and this one felt a bit more orangey orange, if that makes any sense. So anyways, that was Juvias Place, the Saharan2 palette for shade number 7. So now for shade number 8, we're gonna need to go back into the Surge palette here. Oh, I'm gonna have an avalanche. There we go. I think I need to throw out all the plastic covers. They're just wreaking havoc in my world here. So anyways, this is from Blend Bunny Surge. It will be number 8, and it is the shade called Flash. Is it Flash? Yes, right here. And it's this shimmery shade here, which in the pan looks pretty close to that first shade Tahitian Pearl that I picked from Mardi Gras, but it is not. And I'm going to take... oh, here, let me get a clean finger because I don't want to use a finger that had a dark shade on it. I'm trying my best here, but some of these shades stain a little bit. So anyways, this is Flash from Blend Bunny Surge, and then this was shade number 8, and I thought this one was really close to the one that was in the palette. So shade number 8. So now for shade number 9, this was the second hardest one to find. So I thought, because I have so many greens, again, I should have them all. I should find it. I swear I have this color, and I literally went through every palette and I'm like, I'm not finding it. And then I found it in this little palette. So this is the Elf bite-sized eyeshadow palette in Hot Jalapeño. This one was quite the wrecker of the internet a few years ago, and it is the 3rd shade in, and it is this shade here. I don't have any names on them. I don't think they ever had names, or if they did, it was on the plastic wrap, so, but I don't think it did. So I'm calling it the 3rd In Elf from the Hot Jalapeño, and it is this shade here. And like I said, it is the closest one that I had, but I think this one might run a little bit more olivey. But again, This is a pretty original palette. So this was something, if I was looking to buy right now, I wouldn't consider, because it seems pretty original. And then again, this is the Elf bite-sized eyeshadow palette in Hot Jalapeño, and it is the third out of the fourth shade. This one has 2 mattes, 2 shimmers in it. So it's the first of the matte shades, however you want to look at it. So that is number 9 on the palette. Now for number 10, we go back to the Wilderness palette. And it is the shade called Ray. What I'm looking for. Yeah, there we go, another shimmer. So there we go. It is this light, it looks like almost like a champagne-y one here. So this is what we have as a shade number 10. This one has a really nice reflect to it. And there we go. And that was the thing with this one. We're looking for one that was shimmery golden, but felt like it had a little bit of a green hue to it. And the shade Ray was the closest one that I had. Isn't it really beautiful? And that again was from the Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay. Alrighty, so we're getting close to the end here. We're on the last couple shades. And for number 11, I've been really enjoying this little palette. I got this in the mystery box or Christmas advent calendar. That was it, the advent calendar. So this is from PLouise. It is from the It Takes Two series, and it's Half My Heart Belongs to You. So it's the Best Friends palette, I believe. And it is this, it lights up, it's so much fun. But this is one where each one has a matte and it has a shimmer shade. And the one that I thought fit best for number 11 is from the Me and You duo, and it is the matte shade that's here. And then this one worked as number 11 for me. Let's pop that there, and that's there. And then number 11, was this an easier one to find? Yeah, I think so. It felt just like a nice warm chocolatey brown. And since I don't have tons and tons of neutrals, but I thought this one looked really good. This is actually turning out to a really pretty palette. So that's number 11. So that's from PLouise, from the It Takes Two, and it is the Best Friends one. And then the last shade that I have in here is from a favorite palette of mine, and it is Tiny Marvels and from Sydney Grace. And of course, this was the collab palette. So if we want to go to number 12, it is the shade of Fire Butts. I really love the name of that shade. She did a good job. And it is this shade here. And then we're going to go into number 12. There we go. So this is what we had here for our 12 shades. I think that turned out pretty good. Again, it's not quite, but it just feels reminiscent of. So those are the 12 palettes. So I'm just going to go take some pictures of swatches, and then we can do a quick eye look using some of these colors. We'll be back in one sec. Okay, so let's do a quick eye look using some of the shades that we picked. I'm going to be using my PLouise primer in Rumor 2 to start this off, and then we'll pick a color story. So now looking at the palette, it has a little bit of a purpley vibe. It has, my favorite, it has a bit of a green vibe, and then it has some neutral twists. So I think because I'm wearing a green sweatshirt, I'm going to do green, but I'm going to add a little bit of neutrals to it as well. I think that's what we're going to do, or at least a little neutral shimmer maybe. I don't know, or maybe, yeah. Okay, I think I might have an idea because I want to use Fire Butts from the Sydney Grace collection there. There we go. So we've got our primer on board. So now let's play. We have a beautiful sunny day here in Vancouver. I'm gonna go on an errand after this and pick up a special package for a friend. So it's from one person that's going to another person, but it is a fun thing, and but I will leave that up to the person to post if they want to post about it later. Alrighty, so I think I'm going to go into shade number 9 to start. And number 9 was from the jalapeno one. So that was the first matte or the third one in the palette. So I'm going to grab that and, oh man, I'm going to take a fluffier brush. And I'm going to do that on the outer edge here to put down the green. And then I think maybe I'll do that nice bright green shimmer in the middle. And then we can use Fire Butts as the front part and inner corner, I think. I think that's what we're doing. Can maybe take a few other matte shades to stick on the bottom maybe if I want to. But I'm just going to do, again, always a simple look. This is supposed to be like a bridal party palette, so you can use for the bride, the bridesmaid, groomsmen if so inclined. You can, yeah, I think the color story to the actual palette itself is really beautiful. I did mention in my new releases, it was just a color story that I normally wouldn't have gravitated to. I would have said, oh, those two, the two greens and that's it. But then when I looked at the swatches, it was actually just a really nice combination of colors. Been wanting to try Klarity Cosmetics. So if I ever go in, you never know, that could be one that I throw in. But they do some very beautiful, like they had a mermaidy one. They do have some beautiful colored palettes. So there we go. We just went into the jalapeno one. So from the Elf quads, the original set of these ones are really good. I disliked the minty ones immensely, and if they've released, I think they've released some more afterwards, so I don't know what the third iteration, if they are more towards the first or more towards the second in quality. They're more towards the first because I have a couple other I have a rosy one and a neutrally one from this series because I loved this one so much. I just picked up a couple other ones. So there we go. I just did a little bit to there to blow out that. And then the other shade was, what number was that one? So the other green shade was the third shade, and we were taking from the Wilderness palette, and it was the shade Moss, and it was that beautifully green shimmery shade. So I think because it's a nice dark one, I'm gonna pop that into the middle. So depending, I guess, on if you're having a nice, beautiful spring wedding, I think having shades of green would be really, really nice. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? And then I'm just going to pop them out. Like, look. Now, I find with, at least for me, that I find that the Beauty Bay ones, some of the shimmers do break up on me, that I have to kind of tap them through the day. The Dark Matter palette, which was the last one I bought, I didn't have that problem. So I'm wondering if they have upped their shimmer game. But when it's these putty ones that they have, like this one I think is a mix. It has a couple regular, but mostly putties. The putty ones definitely go on nicer with the finger if you can. I mean, if you're doing more detailed work, smaller work, yeah, you'd have to use a brush. But I find that this really like kind of pushes it in and gives me a little bit more longevity with these. So there we go. And then I'm going to blend up a little bit. I think I need to reach just a smidge higher, so that way when I have my eyes totally open, you can still see a little bit of color over top. So I may need a little bit more from the Elf Jalapeno palette to just raise the one, is it both sides? Yeah, especially this side, just a little bit higher up. Okay, yeah, that's better. Yes, that's feeling way better. All right, so now we're gonna go into the Sydney Grace, and then we're gonna go into the shade Fire Butts, just on a little brush, and then see how this goes on. I remember, yes, I was gonna say, I remember these going on beautifully with a brush, but my memory's not that good, so I didn't want to say until I did. And then, yes, this Fire Butt shade is beautiful. The green shade that's in here, the paler shade, I thought that would have almost been the shade, what number again? For number 9, I thought this could have almost been here. Let me swatch it. It's the shade Mantis. Oh, I guess I didn't wash those off very well. But I thought this one also would be, but it was just a little bit brighter. And the other shade that I picked, the one from the Elf one, was just a little bit more towards the mossy tone, I guess. So anyways, but that was my other choice. It was the one I sat on for quite a while until at the last moment I found the jalapeno one. And I was like, yeah, that's a little bit closer to the swatch, I think. Look how beautiful this is. I woke up this morning and I lost an hour. It was the time change this morning. So yeah. So I lost an hour, so now I'm a little bit discombobulated. So anyways, I really love this collab that was with Mel Thompson and Sydney Grace. It is so beautiful. Just try to ration this palette a little bit. So there we go. So for the bottom shade, okay, let's do shade number 4 on the bottom instead, and that is Grunge from the Surge palette. So let's do that. So again, that was this shade here, this warmer brown. So let's bring that onto the bottom, just so we can use a few more shades in there and then just anchor the bottom lash line. So I'm just gonna do that. Excellent. So there we go. Oh, look how beautiful and shiny this is. Yes, yes, please. Alrighty, so there is that. I'm gonna go put on my base and then we can have some quick final thoughts. 1 second. Okay, so here is what the original palette inside looked like. Here are the photos of the shades that I used, and then comparing the swatches a little bit. As you can see, I just kind of got the feeling there of not quite matching, except for kind of the last shades, I think. Okay, we're back. Here is our final look. Boy, I need a bang trim, but I think I like how this turned out. I just put on a little black liner from Amaterasu, mascara, did my normal base of products that I'm using in my project pan, and here we are. So I like how this turned out, nice and shimmery. And yeah, so in the end, what do I think of the Klarity cosmetic build? I think I did an okay job. You will have seen the swatches and the comparisons that I kind of inserted just before this, but I think I did okay. I think I totally got the feeling. And again, taking pictures of the eyeshadow, sometimes they're a little bit light. It's hard to get exactly. So I can see how, looking at the palette and then comparing to the swatches, how you can see a little bit difference. I think unless you have the perfect studio lights and everything works out perfectly, I think it's kind of hard. So like you'll look, I can see that for shades, what is it, 6 and 7, they look quite different when I took photos of them compared to the actual palette, but then when I swatched, they were closer to what the swatches look like. So yeah, I think I got the feeling. So we're gonna go with that. So again, so this is again, from my collection, a pretty interesting color story. I went through, I think, almost every single palette I own, trying to find colors to match up. So again, this is another one where you think it might be pretty similar, but it is quite original. But you can make something reminiscent of it, so you don't have to spend the money. So at the moment, this is helping with my FOMO, that I think this is another one that I'm okay not to get right now, because I can get something similar by building my collection, which is kind of my goal, to do this, to show that you can do it, that if you have a lot of makeup, that you probably have something close enough that you don't need to spend the extra money. Again, if you want to, go ahead. I'm not your banker. So yeah, if you like this video, please give it a like, a comment, and subscribe, and maybe even hit that notification bell. If not, that's okay. We can still be friends and continue our journey in building palettes together. As always, behave, make good choices, and we will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.